On an ordinary afternoon, a businessman was surprised by a barefoot girl asking for help in a parking lot. Under his car, he found a simple snack, the beginning of a story of generosity that would change his view of the world. That small gesture sparked a transformation that would forever change both their lives. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Now, on with the story. It was the end of a typical afternoon in New York City, as the sky began to take on orange hues and traffic grew ever denser on the avenues that sliced through the metropolis. The mall parking lot was completely packed, as it always was at this peak hour. Cars of every make and model vied for spots, drivers honked impatiently, and hurried people wove between vehicles carrying shopping bags or briefcases. There was a frantic energy in the air, that classic feeling of a city that never sleeps, where everyone seems to be perpetually late for some important engagement. Amid all that chaotic hustle walked Ryan Miller, a 43-year-old executive who had built a successful life at the cost of hard work and an almost obsessive dedication. Tall, with broad shoulders that filled out the tailored suits he wore daily, Ryan had a face marked by time and the constant tension of someone living under pressure. His dark hair was starting to show silver at the temples, giving him a distinguished, mature look. That was impressive in business meetings. His brown eyes, though intelligent and attentive to detail, carried a deep weariness, an exhaustion that went beyond the physical and reached something more fundamental in his being. On that particular Thursday afternoon, Ryan crossed the parking lot with his characteristic stride, leaning discreetly on a fine wooden cane with polished silver details. The cane wasn't just an elegant accessory that some might mistake for a style choice. It was a real necessity. 5 years ago, a serious car accident on the Long Island Expressway, one of the busiest and most dangerous highways in the region, had left his right leg with minor but permanent damage. The collision could have been fatal, the doctors had said at the time, and Ryan knew it all too well. There were moments, especially during sleepless nights, when he still remembered the impact, the sound of twisting metal, the absolute fear he felt in those eternal seconds. But even though it was just a small physical limitation in the grand scheme of things, that cane was a constant reminder of vulnerability, of mortality, something a man like him, accustomed to controlling everything around him, preferred not to dwell on. He balanced his cell phone between his shoulder and his left ear, talking tensely with his business partner, Mark, about the latest fiscal quarter's results. The conversation was fraught with tension, filled with numbers, optimistic and realistic projections, and concerns about the competition and the ever-changing market. The business consulting firm they had founded together 12 years ago was growing steadily, expanding into new sectors and winning over larger, more demanding clients. But growth also brought proportionally increasing pressures. Investors wanted better results quarter after quarter, clients demanded more value for their money, and employees needed constant attention and direction. It was a never-ending cycle of demands that consumed literally every minute of Ryan's day, including the weekends he rarely managed to enjoy. Too focused on the conversation about profit margins and expansion strategies, completely immersed in the commitments that still lay ahead of him that evening, he barely noticed when a small, frail figure emerged in his path from between two parked cars. It was only when he heard a child's voice, high-pitched and filled with genuine urgency, that he finally pulled his attention away from the business call. "Sir, please, I really need your help," the voice said, timid but insistent, carrying a determination that contrasted with the speaker's apparent fragility. Ryan stopped abruptly and looked down, his eyes leaving his phone screen for the first time in minutes. Before him stood a girl who couldn't have been more than 9 or 10 years old, though it was hard to say for sure. Her face was thin, almost angular, with prominent cheekbones that spoke of a clearly insufficient and irregular diet. Her eyes were large, dark, and surprisingly expressive, contrasting sharply with the paleness of skin that rarely saw the sun in a healthy way. Her brown hair was messy and tangled, tied back in a sloppy ponytail with an old stretched-out elastic that looked like it was on its last legs. She wore a pink t-shirt that had once been a vibrant, cheerful color, but was now completely faded by time and poor washing. It was also far too big for her slender frame, drooping awkwardly over her shoulders. Her jean shorts had a significant tear at the knee, not the fashionable kind people paid a premium for in designer stores, but a genuine rip from constant wear and tear, from a lack of resources to replace or properly mend it. But what caught Ryan's attention the most, what made his heart ache without him quite understanding the visceral reaction, were the girl's feet. They were completely bare, caked with dust, dirt and asphalt, with small, fresh cuts and old, healed scratches that told the silent story of entire days and nights on the city's unforgiving streets. There were visible calluses on her soles, unmistakable signs that walking without any protection was a routine part of her daily existence. "Mark, I have to go. I'll call you back in a bit to finish this," Ryan said quickly into the phone, hanging up before he could even hear his partner's likely confused response. He slipped the phone into the inner pocket of his tailored jacket and looked at the girl with renewed focus, trying to make sense of the unusual situation. "What is it, sweetie? Are you lost here at the mall? Do you need me to call security or someone from your family?" The girl shook her head vigorously, biting her lower lip as if gathering all the courage she possessed to speak to this well-dressed adult. "No, sir, I know exactly where I am, but I need you to do something for me, please. It's really, really important." Ryan instinctively glanced around, looking for a responsible adult, someone who should have been watching over this clearly vulnerable child, but there was absolutely no one. The girl seemed to be completely alone amidst the urban chaos of cars, hurried people, and widespread indifference. "What exactly do you need?" She pointed a small, dirty finger at his car, a late-model silver BMW parked strategically just a few feet away, gleaming and imposing under the approaching orange glow of dusk. "Could you please look under your car? Please. It's really serious. I'm not kidding." Ryan furrowed his brow, confused and admittedly a bit suspicious of the strange request. Look under his car? That was definitely odd. Was this some new kind of street scam he didn't know about? But looking closely at the frail little girl, seeing the crystal-clear sincerity in her large, vulnerable eyes, he found it extremely difficult to imagine any ill intent. "Why exactly should I look under my car? Can you explain?" The girl took a hesitant step forward, clasping her small, dirty hands together as if in a desperate plea. "Please, sir, I hid something really important under there. But it's nothing bad or dangerous, I swear on my life. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't put anything there that could hurt you or the car. I just really need you to look before you drive away, please." Ryan sighed deeply, feeling the weight of his impatience, but also something else, a reluctant curiosity. This was eating up precious time he definitely didn't have to spare. He had an important meeting with a potential client in exactly 45 minutes on the other side of the city. He needed to swing by his apartment to change and grab some forgotten documents, and he still had literally dozens of urgent emails to answer before the end of the day. But there was something in the girl's voice, a genuine vulnerability mixed with an impressive determination for someone so young that made him reconsider his automatic refusal. "All right," he said finally, his voice becoming involuntarily softer than usual. "But make it quick, okay? I have important places to be." "Yes, sir. Really quick. I promise," she replied, visible relief washing over her thin face. They walked the few feet to the gleaming car together. The girl kept a respectful distance, but remained watchful, her dark eyes fixed on the expensive vehicle as if it were something tremendously important to her. Ryan bent down with considerable care, supporting his weight on his wooden cane as he leaned awkwardly to look under the car's low chassis. The golden light of the setting sun still partially illuminated the narrow space between the warm asphalt and the car's underbelly, and that's when he saw it clearly. A small, neat package wrapped in brown paper, strategically placed right next to the rear right tire, sheltered and hidden. "Is this yours?" he asked, his curiosity growing, as he slowly straightened up and looked at the girl with renewed interest. She hurried over and knelt on the still warm pavement without a second thought, not caring about the dirt. With extreme care, as if handling something incredibly valuable and fragile, she retrieved the small package with both hands. Ryan noticed that her small, dirty hands were trembling slightly as she held the bundle. The package was still warm to the touch. "Yes, it's mine, sir," she said softly, almost in a whisper, clutching the package tightly to her thin chest with both protective hands. "It's my lunch for today." Ryan blinked several times, processing the unexpected information that made no immediate sense. "Your lunch? Why on earth did you hide your lunch under my car? I don't understand." The girl looked down at the ground, as if deeply ashamed to have to explain the humiliating situation. "There were some bigger boys following me through the mall. They always do that to me and the other kids. Whenever I manage to get something to eat during the day, they show up out of nowhere and take it from me. They're a lot stronger and older, so I can never stop them. Today, when I saw them coming towards me again, I ran over here and hid my food under your car. It was the only thing I could think of fast." Ryan felt a tight knot form in his stomach, a physical sensation of discomfort and outrage. This fragile child had to literally hide food from others who wanted to steal it. What kind of cruel, unjust world was this, where children had to fight for scraps? "But why my car specifically?" he asked, his voice now considerably gentler and more interested. Her answer came with a disarming simplicity that hit him like a punch. "Because you always park here at the mall, sir. Every single day at the exact same time, between 5 and 5:30 in the afternoon. I noticed a long time ago. Your car is big and it's always in this spot or one nearby, so I figured it would be a safe place to hide my food until the boys left, and I could get it back." Those simple, honest words struck Ryan with an unexpected force, like direct physical blows to his chest. This unknown girl had been watching him for how long? She knew his daily routine, his exact schedule, recognized his expensive car among hundreds, and all this time, for potentially weeks or even months, he had never once even noticed her, never stopped for a second to consciously look around and truly see who inhabited this shared space every day. He was so completely absorbed in his own corporate world, so intensely focused on his endless commitments and business problems, that he had become completely blind to the real people around him, especially the most vulnerable. "Right, I understand now," he said after a moment, trying to regain some emotional composure. "You've got your lunch back, now you can go eat in peace. The mean boys are probably long gone by now." But the girl didn't move an inch. She remained standing there, holding her precious package, staring at Ryan with those large, dark, intensely piercing eyes. Then, with slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial movements, she began to carefully unwrap the crumpled brown paper. Inside, slowly revealed, was a simple, savory pastry. It wasn't large or particularly pretty, and it definitely didn't look like it came from any of the fancy bakeries in the upscale mall. It was humble, probably. Bought at some cheap, simple bakery on the outskirts of town, or perhaps even given to her by a charitable soul. But it was there, whole and intact, still slightly warm from being cooked. The girl looked at the pastry for a long, silent moment, as if making a tremendously difficult and important decision. Then she slowly raised her eyes to Ryan and did something he would absolutely never forget for the rest of his life. "Would you like some?" she asked in a soft but firm voice, extending the open package towards him with both hands. Ryan was completely frozen, as if he'd been hit by an electric shock. For a long moment he genuinely thought he had misunderstood, that his ears had deceived him. "You want what? Could you repeat that?" "The pastry, sir," she repeated patiently, moving the package even closer to him. "You look very tired, exhausted even, and hungry too. More than I am right now." No, absolutely not." Ryan shook his head vigorously, almost desperately. "That's yours. You need to eat it. You must be much hungrier than I could ever be. Go ahead and eat." But the girl insisted with surprising determination, her large dark eyes fixed on his with an intensity that was both vulnerable and incredibly strong. "It's no problem, sir. I can wait until I get something else later. But you really look like you need it more than I do right now. You look very sad, too." There was so much crystal-clear sincerity in those simple words, so much absolute purity in that unexpected gesture of generosity, that Ryan felt something deep inside him crack and break, like ancient ice finally melting. It was as if a thick wall of emotional ice he didn't even consciously know he had built around his heart over the years was finally beginning to shatter. This frail girl, who clearly had almost nothing in the world, who had to desperately hide what little food she could get from others who wanted to steal it, who lived a harsh and cruel reality he could barely begin to imagine, was generously offering him, an obviously wealthy and well-dressed man, the only food she had for the entire day. "Why?" he asked in a choked voice, hoarse and lower than he intended, feeling long-suppressed emotions threatening to overflow. "Why would you do this for me? Why offer me your food?" Her answer came simply, directly and honestly, as if it were the most obvious and natural thing in the world. "Because it's the right thing to do, sir. You share what you have, even if it's not much. That's what my grandma always taught me. She says you always have to help people who need it, even when you need help too." Ryan swallowed hard, feeling a painful lump in his throat he hadn't felt in years, maybe decades. He looked around the busy parking lot, clearly seeing the dozens of people rushing past completely, oblivious to the extraordinary scene unfolding right in front of them. No one stopped for a second, no one looked closely, no one cared in the slightest. And here was this fragile, brave girl, generously offering everything she had. "You didn't wait for me to drive away to get your lunch back safely," he observed, desperately trying to buy time to process the overwhelming whirlwind of emotions he was feeling. "Why not do that? It would have been much easier and safer for you." The girl shrugged, a simple gesture that revealed a practical wisdom far beyond her young age. "If the car moved before I told you, the tire could have run over it and completely crushed the pastry. I didn't want to take that risk. It's the only food I've gotten all day. I can't afford to lose it." Ryan closed his eyes tightly for a long moment, feeling the crushing weight of those honest words. When he finally opened them again, he had made a decision. "Okay, I agree," he said, and for the first time in a very, very long time, there was something genuinely human, vulnerable and real in his voice. "Let's do this, let's split the pastry. Half for you, half for me, but only if you agree to sit here with me and we eat it together side by side. How does that sound?" The girl hesitated visibly, her eyes carefully assessing whether this was really safe, whether she could genuinely trust this adult man in an expensive suit with a silver cane. After a tense moment that seemed to last an eternity, she finally nodded slowly, accepting. They sat right there, on the still warm concrete of the parking lot, leaning their backs against the gleaming, expensive rear of the silver BMW. Ryan had to settle himself with considerable care because of his injured leg. And surprisingly, unexpectedly, the girl spontaneously helped him without being asked, gently holding his cane as he sat down awkwardly and then handing it back to him with extreme care. She then broke the pastry in half with careful, almost reverent precision, as if performing a sacred and important ritual, and deliberately extended the visibly larger half to Ryan with both hands. "Your half should be bigger than mine," she explained with touching seriousness. "Why do you think that?" he asked, genuinely curious about her reasoning. "Because you're a lot bigger than me. You need to eat more to have enough energy." Ryan almost laughed out loud at the perfectly childish, innocent and pure logic that also made perfect sense. He gratefully accepted the generously offered half and carefully brought it to his mouth. It wasn't objectively the best pastry he had ever eaten in his life. The dough was a bit tough and cold at the edges, evidence that it wasn't fresh, and the filling was extremely simple, just shredded chicken with basic economical seasoning. Likely prepared with very few resources, but in that unique and extraordinary moment, sitting uncomfortably on the hard ground of a public parking lot, next to a homeless girl who had bravely chosen to share with him the only thing she possessed in the world, that was absolutely and unquestionably the most significant, most profound, most transformative, and most important pastry Ryan Miller had ever tasted in his entire adult life. They ate in comfortable silence for a few precious minutes. Ryan discreetly watched the girl from the corner of his eye and saw with touching attention how she chewed slowly, extremely slowly, savoring every tiny morsel as if it were something infinitely precious, rare and valuable. There was absolutely no rush in her deliberate movements, no anxiety or urgency. It was as if this present moment, this simple act of eating half of a humble pastry, was literally all that mattered in the entire world in that suspended instant. "What's your name?" he finally asked gently, breaking the pleasant silence that had naturally settled between them. Julia, she answered sweetly, licking her delicate fingers so as not to waste a single precious crumb. Julia Williams. And what's your name, sir? Ryan Miller. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Miller, she said with an adorable old-fashioned formality that made Ryan smile genuinely for the first time in a very, very long time. Just Ryan is perfectly fine, Julia, he corrected with paternal kindness. You don't have to call me sir. It makes me feel too old. Julia smiled back, a small but absolutely genuine smile that completely lit up her thin, pale face. Okay then, Ryan. Thanks for sharing the pastry with me today. Ryan felt his heart clench again. I should be the one thanking you, Julia. You taught me something very important today. The next morning, Ryan woke up earlier than usual, despite having slept only a few hours during the restless night. His thoughts were completely consumed by Julia and the extraordinary encounter from the day before. As he mechanically got ready for another day of work, putting on his navy blue suit and adjusting his tie in front of the bedroom mirror, he couldn't stop thinking about the barefoot girl who had shared her only food with him. Before even leaving for the office, Ryan made a decision that surprised him. He left early and stopped at a traditional neighborhood bakery, one of those with display cases full of freshly baked treats. He bought a large bag filled with things, still warm, steaming cheese rolls, fresh and crispy chicken pastries, assorted savory turnovers with meat, cheese and spinach, chocolate truffles wrapped in colorful foil, and small bottles of fresh orange and strawberry juice. The bakery clerk was visibly perplexed by the absurd amount of food for one person, but Ryan offered no explanation and didn't care about the curious glances. Throughout the day at the office, he had immense difficulty concentrating. Meetings seemed to drag on endlessly, and the financial reports that usually absorbed him completely now seemed meaningless and empty. His thoughts constantly returned to Julia, to that profound lesson in generosity he had received from a child. When the clock finally struck 5 in the afternoon, Ryan quickly dismissed his remaining appointments and left the office with remarkable haste. His closest colleagues were puzzled by this completely atypical behavior. Ryan Miller never, ever left work early. He was always the last one to leave, often working late into the night under the artificial lights of the empty office. But on that day, there was something different about him, an urgency that no one could quite understand. When he arrived at the mall parking lot, his heart was pounding faster than usual. A strange anxiety gripped him. What if Julia wasn't there? What if something terrible had happened to her during the night on the dangerous streets? What if yesterday's encounter had been a unique, unrepeatable, magical moment that would never happen again? He parked carefully in his usual spot and, before even getting out of the car, looked around, anxiously searching for the girl. For one agonizing moment, he didn't see her anywhere and felt panic begin to rise in his tight chest. But then he found her. Julia was sitting on a concrete curb a few yards ahead, engrossed in what looked like an old yellowed magazine someone had discarded. When she looked up and saw him, her thin face lit up with a genuine, radiant smile that warmed Ryan's heart in a way he hadn't experienced in years. "You really came," she said excitedly, jumping up and running towards him with light steps, despite her still bare feet. "I promised yesterday, didn't I?" Ryan replied, feeling immense relief flood his entire being. He opened the trunk of his car and took out the large brown paper bag full of food. "I brought some things for you today." Julia approached curiously and carefully peeked inside the open bag. Her eyes widened dramatically at what she saw. It was so much food, more food together than she had seen in a very, very long time. She looked at Ryan in astonishment, then back at the bag, and then at Ryan again, as if she simply couldn't believe it was real. "Is all of this really for me?" she asked, her voice trembling with restrained emotion. "All for you," he confirmed with a fatherly smile. "But it's too much, Ryan," she protested gently, her voice filled with gratitude but also practical concern. "This is way more than I need by myself. I'm going to take it to my grandma, too. She'll be so happy and relieved. It's been days since we've eaten this well." Ryan felt his heart ache painfully again. "Then tell me about her, about your grandma. I'd really like to know more." And right there, Sitting once again on the curb of that noisy, busy parking lot, with the sun beginning to set and painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Julia began to tell her story with a moving and disarming honesty. She spoke of Miss Eleanor, a strong and resilient 62-year-old woman who had been a skilled and dedicated cook her entire life. She had worked tirelessly in the homes of wealthy families, in small local diners, in modest boarding houses, always struggling to support her family. When Eleanor's only daughter, Julia's mother, mysteriously disappeared without a trace 7 years ago, it was the grandmother who immediately took on the enormous responsibility of raising her young granddaughter alone, without any outside help. "My grandma makes the most delicious food in the whole world," Julia said, pride shining brightly in her dark eyes. "She knows how to make absolutely everything: pot roast, gumbo, fluffy carrot cake, warm homemade bread. Everything she makes is wonderful and special. People always used to praise her cooking." "And why are you going through such terrible difficulties now?" Ryan asked with genuine gentleness, trying to understand the full situation. Julia looked down sadly at her small hands. "My grandma got sick about 6 months ago. Nothing too serious, thankfully, but she had to stop working for a few weeks to recover. And when she finally got better and tried to go back to work, she couldn't find anyone who wanted to hire her. Everyone said the same thing, that she was too old, too tired, that she didn't have the energy to cook professionally anymore. But that's not true. She has plenty of energy and wants to work. She just desperately needs a fair chance." Ryan listened intently to every word, his indignation and anger growing proportionally. This woman, who had dedicated her entire life to honest work, who had raised a granddaughter alone after losing her daughter, was now on the streets with the child simply because of a lack of fair opportunities and the casual cruelty of society. It was profoundly unjust on every level. "And where exactly do you two live, Julia?" he asked, though he already had a good idea of the answer. Julia hesitated visibly before answering. "We stay under the BQE overpass in the central part of the city. There's a big, sturdy blue tarp there that we got as a donation. We sleep under it every night. It's not very comfortable or warm, especially when it rains or gets really cold, but at least it protects us a little from the rain and strong wind." Ryan closed his eyes tightly for a moment, trying to control the intense emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. When he opened them again, there was a new, crystal-clear determination in his gaze. "Julia, I would very much like to meet your grandmother in person. Do you think she would agree to talk with me? I promise I have good intentions." The girl bit her lower lip nervously, seeming to carefully weigh whether this was really safe, whether she could fully trust this man who had so suddenly appeared in her difficult life. After a long moment of careful thought, she finally nodded. "Okay, I agree. You can come with us right now if you want and have the time." Ryan glanced quickly at the expensive watch on his wrist. It was exactly 6:15 in the evening. He had business dinners scheduled, urgent emails to answer, important reports to review before the next morning. But all of that, which would normally be an absolute, non-negotiable priority, seemed completely insignificant in the face of this unique opportunity. "Let's go now, then," he said decisively, picking up his cane and standing up. They walked together through the bustling streets of New York toward the overpass. The journey took about 20 minutes at a moderate pace. Julia walked confidently ahead, clearly knowing the way perfectly, while Ryan followed her attentively, leaning on his cane and observing the city around him with completely new eyes. How many countless times had he driven down these same streets, completely isolated in his private world, without ever truly seeing what was happening in them? How many people just like Julia and her grandmother lived here daily, completely invisible to those with too much hurry, too much money, too much indifference to really notice? When they finally reached the specific overpass, Ryan immediately saw the large blue tarp Julia had mentioned. It was surprisingly large and seemingly sturdy, stretched carefully between some makeshift metal structures, creating a precarious but reasonably functional shelter against the elements. Beside it, arranged with impressive care and dignity, were a few modest belongings, neatly folded clothes, old but clean pots, a few worn-out books, and thin blankets. And then Ryan saw her for the first time. Miss Eleanor was sitting intently on a low wooden stool, patiently mending a piece of clothing with a needle and thread. She was a woman of average height with completely grey hair tied in a simple but tidy bun, her face deeply lined by the relentless passage of time and life's countless hardships, but with eyes that still shone brightly with sharp intelligence and unshakable dignity. When she looked up and saw Julia arriving with a well-dressed stranger, she immediately stood up in an instinctively defensive and protective posture. "Julia, who is this man?" she asked in a firm but cautious voice, placing herself between her beloved granddaughter and the potential danger. "Grandma, this is Ryan," Julia explained quickly and excitedly. "He's the one who helped me yesterday, and today he brought us a ton of delicious food. Look, Grandma." Miss Eleanor looked suspiciously at the large bag Julia was proudly carrying, then at Ryan with her experienced, weary eyes, sizing him up with decades of hard-won wisdom. "We don't need your charity, sir," she said with a firm, wounded dignity. "We may be poor, that's an undeniable truth, but we still have our dignity and our pride." Ryan felt the profound weight of those words and immediately respected them. "I understand completely, Miss Eleanor, and I respect that immensely. And I assure you I didn't come here to offer condescending charity. I came because your extraordinary granddaughter taught me a deeply important lesson about true generosity yesterday, and I would sincerely like to repay that in a meaningful and respectful way." Eleanor frowned in confusion. "What lesson is that?" Ryan recounted in detail the transformative encounter in the parking lot, the pastry hidden under the car, and Julia's absolutely extraordinary gesture of offering the only food she had. As he spoke with genuine emotion, he saw Eleanor's tired eyes gradually fill with silvery tears, which she tried to quickly wipe away with the back of her calloused hand. "This girl has a heart too big and pure for this cruel world," Eleanor finally said, her voice thick with pride and love. "That's exactly why I do whatever it takes to take care of her, to protect her. And that's precisely why I want to help you both," Ryan said with absolute sincerity, "not out of cheap pity or guilt, but out of deep and genuine admiration, out of true respect." They talked for over 2 hours right there, under the noisy overpass as night fell heavily on the city. That never sleeps. Ryan listened attentively without interruption to Eleanor's full story, her endless struggles, her frustrated dreams, her small but significant victories, her accumulated frustrations. And the more he listened with real attention and empathy, the more convinced he became that he needed to do something concrete, substantial and lasting, to fundamentally change their unjust situation. When he finally said goodbye and walked back alone to his car at the mall, it was already past 10 at night. Ryan had dozens of missed calls on his phone, urgent messages from concerned partners and clients, and a growing pile of unanswered emails. But for the first time in many, many years, none of it seemed truly important. All the way home, driving through the artificially lit streets of New York, Ryan thought intensely. A plan was gradually forming in his mind, taking shape and substance. It was bold, definitely unconventional, and would probably be questioned and criticized by many. But he felt deep in his heart that it was absolutely the right thing to do. In the following days, Ryan returned religiously to the parking lot every single day. He always brought varied food, new clothes in the right sizes, warmer and more durable blankets, and age-appropriate books for Julia. But more important than the material gifts, he talked with them extensively, learned about their lives, and shared parts of his own solitary existence. A genuine and deep connection was forming among the three of them, something that completely transcended the obvious differences in social class and life circumstances. It was exactly 1 week after their first transformative meeting that Ryan finally made his definitive decision. He had spent those 7 days thinking carefully, meticulously planning every detail and calculating all the possibilities and obstacles. He spoke discreetly with his HR team about procedures, personally checked available spaces in the company building, and consulted with specialized lawyers about complex legal issues. And when he was absolutely certain that his plan was completely viable and well-structured, he scheduled a formal, serious meeting with Ms. Eleanor. He arrived at the overpass on a sunny Saturday morning, carrying his leather briefcase and dressed more casually than usual in jeans and a button-down shirt. Eleanor welcomed him with a natural, generous hospitality that contrasted sharply with the extreme precarity of their surroundings. She had carefully prepared a simple coffee using a makeshift but functional camp stove and politely offered Ryan a cup in an old chipped but impeccably clean enamel mug. "Miss Eleanor, I'd like to make you a serious proposal," Ryan began after a few minutes of pleasant and respectful conversation. "But first of all, I need you to understand and completely believe that this is not charity. It's a genuine job opportunity, with a decent monthly salary and a full-time position with all the benefits." Eleanor looked at him with natural suspicion, but also with a cautious hope beginning to shine in her eyes. "What kind of job are you offering?" "My consulting firm has a corporate cafeteria that serves lunch to about 50 employees every workday," Ryan explained carefully. "Currently, we have a third-party company providing pre-packaged meals, but the quality is extremely poor and the complaints are constant. I would sincerely like to offer you the position of head chef of our in-house cafeteria. You would have complete autonomy to create the menus, choose ingredient suppliers, and organize the kitchen however you see fit." Eleanor was silent for a long moment that seemed to stretch on forever, carefully processing the surprising and unexpected information. Julia, who was sitting quietly beside her, beloved grandmother, squeezed her wrinkled hand encouragingly. "Why would you do this for us?" Eleanor finally asked, her voice completely choked with emotion. "Why would you risk so much for two strangers?" "Because Julia showed me that true generosity has absolutely nothing to do with how much money you have in the bank, but with the genuine willingness to share what you have," Ryan answered, with absolute honesty. "And because I firmly believe that you deserve a fair second chance in life. All of us, without exception, deserve that." The change happened surprisingly fast in the days following that transformative conversation. When Ryan decided to do something, he did it with total dedication and efficiency. The following Sunday, he rented a spacious van and personally helped Eleanor and Julia move their few modest belongings to the new apartment he had so carefully arranged. It was a modest place in Astoria, Queens, with just one decent-sized bedroom, a small but cozy integrated living room, a functional kitchen, and a full bathroom. By Ryan's standards, and those of any middle-class person, it was extremely simple and basic. But for Eleanor and Julia, who had spent months sleeping under a blue tarp, on the hard concrete ground, that small apartment was literally a dream palace come true. It was dignified, clean, safe, a real home. Julia couldn't stop running excitedly from one room to another, completely mesmerized by every detail that was magical to her. "Grandma, look, we have a real bed," she shouted enthusiastically, jumping repeatedly on the new mattress to test the springs. "A bed with clean sheets, soft pillows, and a warm blanket." "And we have a stove that really works," Eleanor said, tears streaming freely down her wrinkled face as she explored every corner of the modest but complete kitchen. "And a working refrigerator and a table to eat at, and look at all these cabinets to store things." Ryan watched them, moved, with a deep warmth in his chest that he hadn't genuinely felt in years, maybe decades. Seeing their pure, intense joy over such simple, basic things that he took for granted made him reflect deeply on his own distorted priorities and questionable values. That memorable evening, before he finally left to let them settle in, Ryan sat with them in the small, cramped living room. Eleanor had lovingly prepared a simple but absolutely delicious dinner, with the basic ingredients he had bought in advance. There was fluffy white rice, perfectly seasoned beans, a juicy roasted chicken, and a fresh salad. The ingredients were common and inexpensive, nothing fancy, but the flavor was exceptional. There was something special about that food, an intangible quality that transcended the physical ingredients. It was made with genuine love, with extreme care, with deep gratitude. "Miss Eleanor, if you cook just like this for my employees, they're going to literally ask me for a raise just to make sure you never leave the company," Ryan joked lightly, smiling. Eleanor laughed, out loud, a genuinely joyful musical sound that completely transformed her tired face. "I will always do my absolute best, Mr. Miller. I solemnly promise you won't regret this brave decision one bit." I've told you several times to just call me Ryan, he corrected gently once more, and I already know for a fact that I won't regret it. Early on Monday, the new transformative routine officially began. Ryan picked them up at 7 in the morning sharp and personally drove Julia to the public school he had carefully chosen. The girl was visibly nervous, clutching the new backpack he had bought for her, but she was also clearly excited and hopeful. He patiently walked her to the main office, efficiently helped with all the registration paperwork, and personally introduced her to the polite and attentive principal. When he finally said goodbye to her at the door of the colorful and welcoming classroom, Julia hugged him tightly with all the strength her small body possessed. "Thank you for everything, Ryan. For absolutely everything you're doing for us. You don't have to thank me so much, Julia. You completely deserve this and so much more." After dropping Julia off safely, at school, Ryan headed to the office with Ms. Eleanor. In the car, she was visibly tense and nervous, constantly fidgeting with her calloused hands, repeatedly adjusting the new blouse she had bought with the advance he had given her. The insecurity was palpable in the car's air-conditioned quiet. "Are you very nervous?" he asked gently, glancing over at her. "Very," she admitted honestly. "It's been so long since I've worked in a structured place like this. What if I don't live up to the high expectations? What if I disappoint you and all the employees? What if they find out I'm just an old street cook with no formal qualifications?" Ryan carefully parked the car in the company garage and turned completely to face her before they got out. "Ms. Eleanor, listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. You have spent your entire life working hard, lovingly caring for your family, and overcoming terrible hardships that most people can't even remotely imagine. You are one of the strongest, most resilient, and most capable people I have ever met in my entire life. So take a few deep breaths, walk in there with your head held high, and confidently show everyone what you're really capable of. I believe in you completely." Eleanor took several deep breaths as instructed and finally nodded with determination. "Okay, I'm ready." The initial reception at the company was predictably mixed. Some of the younger, more open-minded employees welcomed Eleanor with genuine curiosity and natural sympathy. Others, especially the older and more conservative ones, looked on with visible and poorly disguised skepticism, whispering discreetly among themselves about the extremely unusual and questionable hire. Ryan completely ignored the judgmental looks and proudly, personally, escorted Eleanor to the corporate cafeteria, which was strategically located in the basement of the office building. The space was surprisingly large but sadly underutilized. There were functional tables and enough chairs for the employees, but the kitchen was practically empty and abandoned, as the pre-packaged meals were brought in from outside, heated and served without any love. Eleanor walked slowly through the entire space, critically evaluating every detail with her decades of professional experience. "This space has enormous potential," she said thoughtfully, touching the surfaces and examining the basic installations. "With the right equipment and good, efficient organization, you could work culinary wonders here." "Then make a complete list of absolutely everything you need," Ryan said generously. "I'll have it taken care of without delay." In the days that followed, the cafeteria underwent a rapid and impressive transformation. Ryan personally authorized, without hesitation, the purchase of new, high-quality professional equipment, a powerful 6-burner industrial stove, large electric ovens, commercial refrigerators, freezers, pots of all sizes, and every imaginable type of utensil. Eleanor organized everything with an impressive military efficiency, clearly showing that despite her years away from a professional kitchen, she had definitely not lost her magic touch. When the big day finally arrived for her to serve her first personally prepared meal, there was a palpable sense of anticipation in the cafeteria. Employees arrived in the renovated space, commenting excitedly about the visible change, some genuinely excited and curious, others still skeptical and wary. Eleanor had prepared a strategically simple but impeccably executed menu: a succulent chicken stew with tender potatoes, fluffy white rice, creamy, perfectly seasoned beans, a fresh, crisp salad, and, for a special dessert, a traditional homemade caramel flan. The stunning silence that followed the first few bites was absolutely eloquent. Then finally came the enthusiastic comments. "Wow, this is absolutely delicious. I can't believe it. It's been so long since I've had home-cooked food this good. Who is this wonderful new chef? We need to thank her personally." Ryan, who had discreetly come down to the cafeteria to observe from a distance, saw Eleanor's tired face light up completely with each sincere compliment. She was working intently in the kitchen, supervising the final details, and when a group of employees specifically asked to greet her and thank her, she came out, a little shy but visibly moved and proud. "The food is wonderful, simply perfect," a young employee said sincerely. "You truly have blessed hands." "Thank you so much, dear," Eleanor replied with a genuine warm smile. "It's made with a lot of love and dedication for all of you." In the following weeks, Eleanor's transformative presence completely changed the atmosphere of the corporate cafeteria. She wasn't just a technically excellent cook. She was also a genuinely warm and motherly person who sincerely cared about the people she fed daily. She carefully remembered everyone's individual preferences, proactively asked about allergies and specific dietary restrictions, and flexibly adapted recipes to meet special needs. Many employees started arriving purposefully early just to have the aromatic coffee she lovingly prepared, and the lunch hour quickly became one of the most anticipated and appreciated times of the day. But obviously, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Mark, Ryan's pragmatic partner, viewed the whole situation with growing and worrisome suspicion. He was an extremely pragmatic and calculating man, focused exclusively on concrete numbers and measurable results, and he simply couldn't understand why Ryan was investing so much valuable time and considerable financial resources in this seemingly return-free social initiative. It was on a tense Tuesday afternoon that Mark finally confronted Ryan directly in his private office. "We need to have a serious talk about this," he said firmly, closing the heavy door behind him to ensure privacy. "About what specifically?" Ryan asked calmly, though he already knew perfectly well. "About this whole thing with the street cook and the girl you've informally adopted. You realize you're getting way too emotionally involved, don't you? You're spending considerable company money, dedicating precious time that should be focused exclusively on our paying clients, all because of a homeless family you met a few weeks ago. This isn't professional or sustainable in the long run." Ryan felt a justified irritation rise hotly within him, but he consciously forced himself to keep his voice calm and controlled. "It's not an anonymous homeless family, Mark. It's Miss Eleanor, our extremely competent employee, and Julia, a brilliant child who is now in school and finally getting the fair opportunities she always deserved. And as for the company's money, the investment in the cafeteria is already paying for itself. Measurable productivity has increased significantly, the organizational climate has drastically improved, and the employees are visibly more satisfied and engaged. The hard numbers prove it." "But at what real cost to you personally?" Mark insisted stubbornly. "People are talking. They're saying you're having some kind of late-life social conscience crisis, that you're losing your strategic focus, that you're dangerously mixing your personal life with business in a potentially destructive way. This is seriously worrying our investors and major clients." "And what do you honestly think, Mark? Do you think that too?" Mark sighed heavily, running a tired hand through his graying hair. "I honestly think you've changed drastically, and I'm not entirely sure if it's for the better or worse in the long run." Ryan stood up decisively and walked to the large window, looking thoughtfully at the immense city outside. "You're right about one thing. I have changed profoundly, but not in spite of all this, but precisely because of it. I was living completely on autopilot, Mark, working like a mad robot, making a lot of money, accumulating impressive professional achievements. But for what exactly? To come home alone to a cold, empty apartment every night, sleep a few hours and start the empty cycle all over again the next day. Where's the real life in that? Where's the genuine meaning?" Mark fell into an uncomfortable silence, seemingly unsure how to respond to the existential question. "Julia and Ms. Eleanor powerfully reminded me that there's so much more to life than quarterly financial statements and endless meetings," Ryan continued with growing passion. "They showed me the inestimable value of true generosity, deep gratitude, and real, meaningful human connection. And you know what? For the first time in many years, I feel genuinely alive, not just mechanically existing. If that's considered losing business focus, then so be it. But you can't realistically save the whole world, Ryan. Not all the thousands of people in similar situations. I know that perfectly well, Ryan replied with conviction. I'm not naively trying to save the world. I'm just consciously doing what I can for the specific people who crossed my path in a meaningful way. And if that inspires other people to do the same in their own lives, that's wonderful. If it doesn't, at least I know for sure that I've made a profound difference in the lives of two people who deserve it. Mark shook his head, visibly frustrated. I sincerely hope you know what you're doing, Ryan. I do, Ryan said with absolute conviction. For the first time in a long time, I really know exactly what I'm doing and why. After Mark left, visibly dissatisfied, Ryan remained alone in his office for a few minutes, reflecting on the difficult conversation. He genuinely understood his partner's concern. He understood that his actions were extremely unusual, even radical, by established corporate standards. But he didn't regret it for a single second. Every time he saw Julia's radiant smile, every time he tasted Miss Eleanor's delicious food, every time he saw the concrete positive impact those two extraordinary women were having on the company and the lives of the employees, he became even more convinced that he had made the absolute right decision. That afternoon, when he went to pick up Julia from school as he did religiously every day, she came running excitedly towards him with a colorful notebook in her small hands. "Ryan, look!" she said excitedly, carefully opening the notebook to show a colorful drawing. "It's you, me, and Grandma together. The teacher asked us to draw our family, and I drew us." Ryan looked closely at the childish drawing. There were three simple stick figures holding hands, with a bright yellow sun in the upper corner, and a cozy house in the background. It was technically simple, childish, and unpretentious, but it was loaded with deep emotional meaning. Julia considered them family, not by shared blood, not by legal obligation, but by conscious choice, by genuine affection, by deep gratitude. "It's absolutely beautiful, Julia," he said, moved, his voice catching. "Can I keep it?" "Of course you can," she replied proudly, carefully handing him the precious drawing. "It's especially for you." 6 whole months had passed since that transformative encounter in the parking lot, and the lives of everyone involved had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Autumn was finally arriving in New York, bringing cooler, more pleasant days and surprisingly clearer skies, and Ryan felt deeply that he was living a new season in his personal and professional life as well. On that particular sunny Saturday morning, he woke up to an excited text from Julia. It was a photo of her smiling broadly, proudly holding a golden trophy. She had won first place in a school-wide essay contest. The theme was gratitude, and she had written movingly about how a simple act of kindness can completely and permanently transform lives. Ryan felt his eyes well up as he carefully read the profound essay she sent, along with the proud photo. Julia wrote with an impressive maturity and a rare sensitivity about the fundamental lesson she had learned by sharing her pastry, about how that seemingly small moment had changed not only her own life, but also the life of a businessman who was lost in his own meaningless mechanical routine. It was deep, touching, and absolutely true. During those transformative months, much had changed. Eleanor was no longer just the talented cafeteria cook. She had become a beloved maternal presence in the entire company, someone employees turned to not only to praise the delicious food, but also to talk about their lives, vent about personal problems, and ask for wise advice. Julia was thriving at school, her grades were consistently excellent, and she had made several meaningful friendships. But most importantly, a profound cultural transformation had occurred within the company. An employee facing serious financial difficulties had received an interest-free loan. An employee whose child had special needs had received financial support for a specialized school. Solidarity and empathy had become core values, not just empty words in a forgotten corporate manual. It was on a memorable Thursday, exactly 6 months after their first meeting, that Ryan called a special all-hands meeting. There was something extremely important he needed to announce. When everyone gathered curiously in the company auditorium, Eleanor and Julia were sitting in the front row, unsure of what was about to happen. Ryan took the small stage and stood there for an emotional moment, looking at the faces before him. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, his voice firm but emotional. "Today, I want to share something very personal and significant with you. 6 months ago, an extraordinary girl named Julia taught me a lesson that completely changed my life. She showed me that a person's true worth isn't in what they possess, but in what they choose to generously share with others." He told the whole story from the emotional beginning. He spoke of the meeting in the parking lot, the hidden pastry, Julia's extraordinary gesture. He spoke of meeting Ms. Eleanor, of the decision to help them in a concrete way. And then, to the absolute surprise of everyone present, he made an announcement no one expected. "And today," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I would like to announce that I have officially begun the legal process of adopting Julia. With the full blessing and support of Ms. Eleanor, of course, Julia will legally become my daughter." An absolute silence fell over the auditorium for an eternal moment. Then, gradually, the applause began. Timid at first, then growing stronger and more enthusiastic, until every employee was on their feet, applauding emotionally. Julia ran to the stage and hugged Ryan tightly, crying with pure joy. Eleanor also made her way to the stage, dabbing at her tears with a handkerchief. But Ryan wasn't finished. There was one more surprise. "And to celebrate this new family we've formed," he continued, when the applause finally subsided, "I would like to inaugurate something special. A mural at the entrance of the cafeteria, dedicated not just to the three of us, but to all of you who embraced this transformation and made it real." In the following days, the mural was completed and installed. In the center was a beautiful professional photograph of the three of them together, smiling genuinely. Surrounding it were photos of all the employees, creating an impressive mosaic of diverse faces united by shared values. And at the top, in elegant letters, was the phrase Julia had written, "The best things in life begin with a simple gesture." On the day of the mural's official inauguration, everyone gathered for the emotional ceremony. Ryan gave a sincere and profound speech. "Less than a year ago, I was living on complete autopilot," he said honestly. "I worked obsessively, accumulated professional achievements, but I didn't feel genuinely alive. Then a girl named Julia crossed my path and offered me a pastry. It was literally all she had, but she chose to share it with me without hesitation. That simple gesture taught me more than years of expensive college, more than decades of business experience. It taught me that what really matters in life isn't what we selfishly accumulate, but what we generously share. It's not how much we earn, but how much we give. It's not our social status, but our fundamental humanity." He paused emotionally. "And since then, my life has changed completely. I've gained a wonderful daughter, a real family, a true purpose, and all of you have been a fundamental part of this beautiful transformation. You embraced this new culture. You supported each other in beautiful ways. You proved that it's possible to succeed in business without losing your essential humanity. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for that." The employees applauded for a long time, many with emotional tears in their eyes. Eleanor then took the stage. "I spent most of my life feeling invisible," she said, her voice firm but emotional. "People saw me cleaning, cooking, serving, but they didn't really see me as a person. I was just another anonymous worker, another face in the crowd. But Ryan truly saw me. He saw my granddaughter. He gave us genuine dignity, real opportunity, profound respect. And more than that, he gave us a real family. So I want to thank not only him, but all of you who welcomed us so warmly, who treat us with daily kindness, who make this place a second home for us. You changed our lives completely." Then it was Julia's turn. She walked onto the small stage, carrying a familiar little brown paper package. Everyone immediately recognized what it was. "6 months ago, I hid a pastry under Ryan's car," she began in a clear voice. "I was so scared, so hungry, so hopeless. But when he helped me, when he agreed to share that pastry with me, everything changed. He could have easily ignored me, could have given me a few coins and walked away, but he stopped. He saw me. He genuinely cared." Julia carefully opened the package and revealed a perfectly made pastry. It was small, but beautifully prepared by her with Eleanor's dedicated help. She approached Ryan and offered it to him with both hands. "I made this pastry especially for you, to thank you for everything, for giving me a real family, a safe home, a good school, a future with possibilities, for teaching me that I matter, that I deserve love, that I can be anything I want to be." Ryan took the pastry, his hands visibly trembling with deep emotion. He looked at the girl who had become his daughter, at the woman who had become an essential part of his life, at all the employees who had embraced this profound cultural transformation. And for the first time in a very long time, Ryan Miller cried openly, without shame, without trying to hide or control it. They were tears of immense gratitude, of deep joy, of true fulfillment. They were the tears of someone who had found his way back to his fundamental humanity, back to what really mattered in life. He took a bite of the pastry, and the taste was absolutely perfect, not because it was technically flawless, but because it was made with pure love, with deep gratitude, with genuine meaning. It was the most delicious pastry he had ever tasted, even surpassing the first one they had shared in the parking lot. That night, after everyone had gone home, Ryan, Julia, and Eleanor stood alone in the empty cafeteria, looking contemplatively at the newly inaugurated mural. "You know what's interesting," Ryan said thoughtfully. "I spent my whole life thinking success was about having more, earning more, conquering more. But now I realize that true success is having people you love, making a positive difference in the lives of others, and feeling part of something bigger than yourself." Eleanor smiled wisely. "That's the absolute truth. For a long time I felt like a complete failure for being on the street, for not being able to give my granddaughter everything she deserved. But now I understand that I always did my best with what I had, and that the love we gave each other, the strength we built together, that was always our greatest wealth." Julia hugged them both tightly. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know that with you two by my side, I can face anything. You saved me, and now I want to use everything I've learned to help other people, just like you helped me." Months later, Ryan's company had become a national benchmark for humanized management and corporate social responsibility. Several other companies began to adopt similar practices, creating cafeterias with quality home-cooked food, implementing concrete employee support programs, and actively encouraging the building of communities within the corporate environment. The story of the shared pastry had spread, inspiring change in many places. Julia continued to excel in school and began volunteering at an organization that helped homeless children. She used her own story to inspire and show that it was possible to overcome terrible difficulties with proper support and fair opportunities. Eleanor expanded her cooking classes and began training other vulnerable individuals, giving them the skills needed to find decent employment. Several partner companies hired her students, creating a growing network of opportunities. And Ryan, he finally found the balance he had been searching for so long. He continued to be a successful businessman, but now his decisions were guided not only by profits, but also by fundamental human values. He came home every day to a loving family waiting for him. He had dinner with Julia and Eleanor. They talked animatedly about their day, and they made plans for the future. The adoption process was finally completed in an emotional ceremony at the courthouse. When the judge signed the official papers, making Julia legally Ryan's daughter, they all cried with joy. Julia proudly held her new birth certificate, which now listed Ryan's name as her legal father. On a special Saturday night a few months after the official adoption, they were having a quiet dinner when Julia asked a profound question. "Ryan, do you regret anything that's happened since that day in the parking lot?" Ryan thought carefully for a moment before answering. "I deeply regret that it took me so long to realize what really matters in life. I regret spending years on autopilot, not really living. But do I regret finding you? Do I regret what I did? Not for a single second. You and your grandmother are the best things that have ever happened to me." Julia smiled broadly. "You know, sometimes I still think about that day. I was so scared when I hid the pastry under your car. But something deep inside me said you were a good person, that I could trust you. And I was completely right. I think about that day constantly too, Eleanor said softly. When you first came to the overpass, I was so suspicious. I thought you were just another rich man wanting to feel good about himself by doing some superficial charity. But you proved me categorically wrong. You didn't just want to help temporarily. You genuinely wanted to be a permanent part of our lives, and that made all the difference in the world. Ryan looked lovingly at the two extraordinary women who had completely transformed his life. You know what I've learned, that the greatest wealth isn't in what we possess, but in what we choose to share. That pastry you offered, Julia, was worth infinitely more than anything I could ever buy with money, because it was given with a pure heart, expecting nothing in return. And that finally taught me how to truly live. That quiet night after Julia had gone to sleep, in her cozy room, Ryan was alone in the living room, looking thoughtfully at the drawing she had made months ago, still lovingly framed on the wall. 3 simple stick figures, holding hands, with a bright sun in the blue sky. It was simple, childish, unpretentious, but it represented something deep and true. It represented the family they had consciously built, not through blood or obligation, but through genuine choice, unconditional love, and pure generosity. Ryan smiled peacefully, feeling a deep peace he had never experienced before in his entire life. He had spent so much time desperately searching for success, obsessively accumulating achievements, and incessantly seeking external recognition. But true fulfillment had arrived when he stopped selfishly seeking and started generously sharing, when he chose to see people as they really were, to genuinely care for them, to make a concrete difference in their lives. And it had all started with a simple gesture, with a pastry split in a mall parking lot, with a brave girl who chose to offer the little she had instead of selfishly keeping it for herself. Sometimes, Ryan thought deeply, the greatest transformations begin with the smallest gestures, a genuine smile, a kind word, an outstretched hand, a shared pastry. Small actions that create waves of impact impossible to fully measure. And as the giant city of New York slept restlessly outside, Ryan Miller felt that he was finally living the life he was always meant to live. A life with real purpose, with true love, with genuine connection. A life truly worth living. The next day, a sunny Sunday, Ryan woke up with a different feeling. Julia and Eleanor were already in the kitchen preparing a special breakfast. The smell of warm homemade bread and fresh coffee filled the apartment. "Good morning, family," Ryan said, using the word for the first time with complete naturalness and ownership. Julia ran and hugged him. "Good morning, Dad." That simple word, Dad, resonated in his heart in a way he never imagined possible. It wasn't blood ties that united them, but something infinitely stronger. Conscious choice, genuine love, deep gratitude. They had breakfast together, talked about plans for the day, laughed at little things. It was an absolutely ordinary scene, one that millions of families around the world lived every day. But for Ryan, who had spent years waking up alone in his cold, empty apartment, it was extraordinary and magical. Later, walking through the park with Julia while Eleanor rested at home, Ryan reflected on the entire transformative journey. A journey that had begun with suspicion and curiosity, passed through fear and doubt, and finally arrived at unconditional love and true family. "Are you happy, Dad?" Julia asked, looking up at him with those large, expressive eyes. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," he answered honestly. "Me too," she said, taking his hand. "And you know what I realized? The pastry I offered you that day wasn't just food. It was a bridge between two different worlds, between two people who needed each other without even knowing it." Ryan stopped and knelt to her level, looking directly into her eyes. "You are very wise for someone so young, Julia. And you're right. That pastry was a bridge, and I am eternally grateful that you had the courage to build it." They continued walking, father and daughter, as the sun shone brightly in the sky. And Ryan knew, with absolute certainty, that this was just the beginning of a long and beautiful journey they still had ahead of them, together. End of story. Dear listeners, we truly hope that the story of Ryan, Julia, and Ms. Eleanor has deeply touched your heart and sparked reflections on generosity and humanity. If you were moved by this transformative journey of love and solidarity, Please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment resonated with you the most. Every day we bring you intense and moving stories like this one, which reveal the immense power of simple gestures and the extraordinary capacity of human beings to transform lives through true compassion and unconditional love. Always remember, you too can. Be like Julia or Ryan. You too can make a profound difference in the life of someone who needs it. The best things in life really do begin with a simple gesture, with a choice to share instead of keep, to see instead of ignore, to love instead of being indifferent. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode with another story that will stir your emotions and make you reflect on what truly matters in life.